How could you do such a thing?" My usually quiet 5-year-old daughter shouted, her eyes wide open. What's more, this happened in the hospital room of my mother-in-law, who was unconscious. I was taken aback by my daughter's stern expression, so different from her usual demeanor. "What are you talking about?" Then, as my daughter continued speaking, someone in the room began to tremble violently. At that moment, a terrifying suspicion welled up inside me. But the truth was far beyond anything I could have imagined. Let me tell you about my whirlwind experience. I'm Carrie. When I was 26, I married Ian, my boss at work, and moved in with his family. Since I was originally in charge of the internet department, I switched to working from home when I got married. Although I was worried about living with my in-laws, my mother-in-law had a kind personality, and we got along well. However, my father-in-law was a quiet man with an unfriendly demeanor. Even when I tried to talk to him, his replies were often just one word, or he would ignore me altogether. I spent my days worrying that he might really dislike me. When I consulted my mother-in-law about it, she would only say, "He doesn't dislike you, dear. I'm sorry, he's not good with words." My own family lived far away, so I relied on my husband and his parents, but I tried to keep my distance from my difficult father-in-law. Later, our daughter Emma was born. She was a cute little girl with big eyes. However, I noticed some peculiar behavior in her. When Emma started speaking at the age of 2, she seemed able to read people's minds. For example, she would say, "Mommy, I think Grandma has a headache." Curious, I asked my mother-in-law if she wasn't feeling well. She replied, "How did you know?" "I've had a migraine since this morning." I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want to surprise my mother-in-law, so I didn't mention that Emma had guessed it. I just said, "I thought you looked a bit pale." But I was amazed by Emma's mysterious ability. When Emma was about 3 years old, she said something that seemed to see right through my heart. "Mommy, it would be nice if you could get along with Grandpa." "Oh, why do you think that?" On the surface, I was acting normally around my father-in-law, so how did Emma know what was in my heart? However, at that moment, she started playing with her toys and didn't answer my question. When she was 4, something happened that confirmed her power for me. A few days earlier, an elderly neighbor who lived alone had passed away. Emma was talking to herself, facing the window. "I see. It's in the garden." She said this and then tried to go outside with a glass of water. Worried, I followed her, and we discovered a small flower seedling planted in a pot in the corner of the neighbor's garden. "The grandmother who passed away asked me to," Emma said as she watered the seedling. I began to believe that Emma might be able to communicate through her heart. But when I told my husband about it, he didn't believe me. In fact, he was creeped out by it. "It's because you're not raising her properly that she's turning into a weird kid with delusions. You need to do a better job," he said. "What? Are you saying everything Emma says is a lie?" I asked. "Of course it is. If she says anything like that in front of me, I'll scold her good." My husband's unusually harsh words surprised me. My father-in-law was nearby and heard our conversation, but he turned his face away, pretending not to hear, and didn't come to my defense. I felt uneasy and thought about talking to my mother-in-law, but I kept quiet, thinking it would be speaking ill of her son and husband. Then one night, I heard loud voices arguing from my in-laws' room. "How could you say such a thing? That's enough." I couldn't make out the details, but it seemed my husband and his parents were having a heated argument. I was worried about the three of them, but I couldn't bring myself to intervene. When my husband returned to our bedroom, his face red with anger, he told me that his father had been harsh with his mother, so he had gotten into an argument while defending her. It seemed plausible coming from my father-in-law, so I believed my husband's story and sympathized with him for standing up for his mother. A few days after that argument, something terrible happened. That day, I had gone to the main office for a meeting. Suddenly, I got a call from my husband at work. "Something terrible has happened," he said, panicking. "What's wrong? Why are you so flustered?" I asked. "Mom collapsed, scratching at her throat, and now she's unconscious," he exclaimed. "What?" Hearing that my mother-in-law had been rushed to the hospital, I hurried there. When I arrived, I found my unconscious mother-in-law lying in bed, with my pale-faced father-in-law and husband at her side. What happened? I asked my husband for details, but he just said, "It was an accident." He seemed too shocked to explain properly. The doctor said they were running tests because she might have eaten something bad, but they weren't sure yet. When I heard it might be food-related, I suddenly remembered something and consulted with the doctor. The doctor said they would look into it, but warned us that if she didn't regain consciousness soon, they couldn't guarantee her survival and we should prepare for the worst. I felt helpless, unable to do anything for my mother-in-law who had always been so kind and supportive to me. The next day, thinking it would be too shocking for Emma, we hadn't told her about her grandmother's hospitalization. But suddenly, Emma said, "Grandma is calling me," so my husband and I decided to take her to visit. When we entered the hospital room, Emma rushed to her grandmother's bedside and held her hand. Then, Emma started trembling, turned around with her eyes wide open and her brow furrowed, and blurted out, "Stay away. How dare you make her eat such a thing? He's trying to kill her." Her stern attitude and loud voice were completely unlike my usually quiet daughter. It was as if someone had possessed her. I held my breath and hugged Emma. "Emma, what are you saying?" However, after hearing Emma's words, I noticed someone behind me with wide eyes and a red face, trembling slightly. It was my father-in-law. When I saw him, a terrifying suspicion arose in me. At first, I didn't understand, but if Emma's words were actually her grandmother's, it made sense. Could it be that my father-in-law had tried to end my mother-in-law's life? If so, I needed to keep him away from her. I tried to seek help from my husband. But when I looked at him, he too was pale and shaking. Furthermore, my husband pointed at Emma and shouted, "Who are you?" before leaving the room, clearly disturbed. I was confused, but then Emma continued speaking. "Carrie, listen. I was surprised to hear my daughter use my name. Only my mother-in-law called me Carrie. And the content of what she said was unbelievable. But as I learned the truth, I vowed to get revenge on the person who had done such a terrible thing to my kind mother-in-law. "What's going on here?" my father-in-law demanded, approaching me. But just then, the police, who had been notified by the hospital, arrived and took my father-in-law away for questioning. "Mother-in-law, please wait. I'll settle this," I said, deciding to return home to uncover the truth. However, not wanting to put Emma in danger, I left her with a close friend. When I got home, I found my husband packing. "Honey, where are you going?" My husband didn't answer me and continued packing frantically. "You don't need to run away, do you? Your father has been taken by the police. And your mother's life is in danger, you know." "Oh, is that so?" Ian seemed surprised for a moment, but I thought I saw his mouth twitch into a slight smile. He turned to face me with a serious expression and pleaded, "So it was Dad who tried to kill Mom after all." Actually, it was Dad who prepared the meal for Mom when she said she had a headache and went to bed. There must have been poison in it. I understood why my father-in-law had started trembling. He must have been terrified, thinking the food he prepared was the cause. "I see. But rather than poison, could it have been something that triggered your mother's allergy?" Ian's face twitched for a moment. When I said, "I'll have the hospital check," my husband muttered, "Don't do anything unnecessary." According to Emma, my mother-in-law had eaten the food prepared by my father-in-law and suffered an allergic reaction that made it difficult for her to breathe. In fact, my mother-in-law was allergic to a specific type of crab protein. Since crab isn't commonly eaten in daily life, it didn't usually cause problems in her day-to-day diet, but if she accidentally ate it, she would experience severe symptoms like nausea and difficulty breathing. Only my father-in-law, Ian, and I had been told about this. I informed the doctor about it to help with her treatment, but I kept it secret from my husband that I had told the hospital. "It must have been Dad. He's after Mom's money, I'm sure," Ian ranted. My mother-in-law was the daughter of a wealthy family. I addressed my husband with a full smile. "I see. But if your father tried to end your mother's life, he'd lose his right to inherit, wouldn't he? Does that mean all your mother's assets would become yours?" "How lucky." "That's right. I'll be filthy rich. This will clear my debts. I'll give you and Emma a luxurious life too," he said. "Oh, that's wonderful. I've always wanted to live like a celebrity. But do you think your father will admit to what he did?" I murmured worriedly. Ian's eyes narrowed sharply, the corners of his lips turned up into an eerie smile. It was as if he was enjoying his next move. "That's why I need you to testify. Say you saw Dad putting crab in the food." "You want me to lie?" I asked. "That's right. You're quick on the uptake. That way, Dad will lose his right to the inheritance, and he'll end up behind bars." As my husband proposed this deception, I pretended to go along with his plan. Satisfied that he had gained an accomplice, my husband smiled contentedly. However, I pressed further into the heart of the matter. but your mother might survive with the hospital treatment. Just when I thought we could become rich, if she lives, it won't happen, will it? Don't worry. I'll secretly put this in Mom's mouth at the hospital, Ian said, carelessly showing me a jar of powder. Does that contain crab powder? I asked. That's right. I'm the one who put this in her food too. Let's get rich together. I already knew from Emma's words that my husband had tried to take his mother's life, but I didn't have any evidence. However, actually hearing my husband's evil plot clearly made me feel miserable. Why go to such lengths? You're supposed to inherit your mother's estate eventually anyway, aren't you? I asked. Because Mom won't listen to me. I asked her for help because I couldn't pay off my debts, but she told me to solve it myself. Parents are supposed to help their children, aren't they? Believing me to be on his side, my husband started spilling everything he had done. According to him, that argument between the 3 family members was a dispute between my husband, who was pressuring his mother to hand over her assets, and my father-in-law, who was defending her. It turned out that Ian had embezzled company money and fallen victim to an investment scam. Panicking to fix the situation, he thought of using his mother's assets to settle it. However, his mother refused, thinking that indulging him wouldn't be good for him in the long run, which led to the argument. I see. Now I understand everything. I've got your confession too, so I'm going to report this to the police. What? What are you talking about? This is our chance to get rich. I told Ian that I had recorded our conversation. In fact, I had just been playing along with Ian to draw out his confession. I coldly told my husband, I don't need money. I can't betray my kind mother-in-law. I'm disappointed in you. Damn it. You tricked me. In that case, I'll make sure you can't talk either. Ian, with a deep furrow between his brows, narrowed eyes, and a cold smile playing on his lips, tried to lunge at me. I shouted at him, "Don't come near me. This conversation is connected to a friend." What? No. I need to get out of here fast. My husband panicked and tried to escape with the luggage he had been packing earlier. Actually, when I left Emma with my friend, I had explained the situation and asked for help. I had kept my phone connected during my conversation with Ian. Just then, we heard the sound of police sirens, alerted by my friend. As Ian tried to escape through the back door, he tripped and fell face first onto the floor, hitting his face hard and giving himself a nosebleed. With a bloody and tear-stained face, he clung to me. "Please, help me. Tell the police it was Dad who did it." Ian's appearance, covered in blood and tears, was pitiful. "I have no intention of helping you. You can reflect on your actions behind bars," I said. And with that, Ian was taken away by the police. I watched him go with a look of contempt. Later, Ian was found guilty. He ended up spending many years in prison for embezzling company money and attempting to take his mother-in-law's life. He also lost his right to inherit his mother's assets as an unworthy heir. With compensation to the company and his debts, Difficult days await Ian even after he gets out of prison. Of course, I divorced him and demanded $20,000 in alimony and $150,000 in child support. Now, I live with my in-laws and Emma. My mother-in-law has recovered, although she's still a bit physically impaired. Seeing my father-in-law diligently taking care of her, I've realized that he's just bad with words but is actually a kind person. Emma's mysterious power seems to have faded as she's grown older. We're living peaceful and happy days. My in-laws encourage me to remarry, as I'm still young, but I have no such inclination at the moment. Seeing my daughter smile is all the happiness I need.